muscles, which are relatively common in runners over the age of 40. Yes.
Starts early.
So by the age of 40, our tissues just become more vulnerable to injury. We become less elastic. Our healing becomes a little bit more delayed or slower. So it does get a little more challenging to be able to run after the age of 40. So there is some impact on the joints. Obviously, if you do not have proper alignment, that can impact the joints. There's a higher injury rate as your age goes up, sometimes, not always. And then just the repetitiveness of just that straight plane, sagittal plane motion can create muscle imbalances. And then it's very, very easy with running to overdo the training. Okay, so we are going to dive into some of these issues a little bit deeper.
So yeah, we're going to go deeper into these topics later in the presentations, but this is just a little overview of some risk factors. So extrinsic ones would be things outside the body that are risk factors. So training program / errors, the shoes that you are wearing, the different running surfaces and or routes, and then the mileage that you are scaling.
Some of those intrinsic factors are poor flexibility. And now I'm kind of thinking about, we talk about poor flexibility, but there's also people who have hypermobility or too much mobility that are maybe not good as runners as well. We can talk a little bit more about that. We've already talked about the malalignment, so not having good biomechanical forces throughout the body, muscle imbalances, so maybe we see the front of the leg being a little bit stronger than the back of the leg, previous injury, running experience, your competitive nature, your age, and any other underlying pathology such as arthritis are those intrinsic factors that we're going to cover today.
So some of the extrinsic ones, more in depth, are the training programs. So 60% of all injuries from running are caused by too much, too soon. So most of us throughout the day, we're sitting at our desk, kids go do homework, we got like an hour of spare time. That happens 3 or 4 times per week. We just get up and we run. We run whatever distance we feel like. We have an hour, we're gonna run, 5-6 miles. And we won't run for another week, and we'll run 5 or 6 miles again. So making sure that we are having a program, allowing yourself to run 1 to 3 times per week is what we think is probably enough for what your goals are, unless you are specifically training for a race, marathon or something, or if you're a long-time runner, you might run more than that. But instead of doing the 3, 4, 5 times per week, use those other days to work on resistance training or cross training or working on mobility to prevent yourself from getting injured. We are doing a 5K program that we wrote for this Lunch and Learn that we will email you out afterwards, probably later this week, where we do a 8 to 12 week program where we literally write down everything that you should be doing, your mileage you're running, the different exercises that you should be doing on your rest days or your strength training days to make it a little easier for you. Obviously, you need to schedule that into your day, make it a priority. You can't just hop in and out of the program. But as a way to keep yourself safe, ensuring that you're getting the proper strength training exercises in your routine. Mileage is another thing. If you are running 40 plus miles a week, which is a lot, you are 90% more likely to get injured. 90%. So if you're training for a marathon and you're running, 5-6 miles per day, you're more likely to get injured. So just being aware of that. And then also running surfaces. Concrete is 50 times harder than asphalt. So if you're just getting out of your desk, hopping on the sidewalk and just cruising around the neighborhood, that is a lot of pain on your body.
Not a good idea.
Not a good idea. So finding a trail, an asphalt trail, I know depending on where you live, these cities are really good trails everywhere. Running on the grass, a lot of people will do that next to the sidewalk. Finding trails at parks, things like that will help reduce the amount of stress that you are sending through your body with every step that you take. Another thing, if you're running on a harder surface, you're more likely to get injured in your knees. So PFPS, which is patellofemoral pain syndrome. So any medial knee pain or tibial stress is caused from harder surfaces. Loose surface, so say you go on vacation, you want to run the beach, you know, who doesn't love to do that? It's a very soft and unstable ground. So if you're not used to running on that, and say you're running, you know, 5 to 6 miles per run, and you do the same thing on the beach, you're going to get a lot of pain up the legs because of the instability that you aren't used to.
Yeah, so if you're, sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
So if you're on vacation and you're like, ooh, it'd be really great to just run up and down the beach, you may or may not even wear your shoes. So that just, it's a loose, unstable surface, and you have to rely a lot on your muscles to help you. And you can get, you know, injuries such as like meniscal irritations, or you could actually end up overusing some of the really tiny muscles in your lower leg that feel like they have to kick in and work more because you're on an unstable surface. So people will say, gosh, I run all the time. I run 5-6 miles a week. I went on vacation. Why did my knee hurt so bad? Why did my calf hurt? Well, it's because you changed your surface of what you were trying to run on. And just because you run that far and that long on a different surface doesn't mean that it's going to transfer over to that soft surface. So you can potentially cause, you know, like some of those irritations in the leg.
Absolutely. And then same with uphill and downhill runs, being aware of your route. How much hills are you doing? If you're not used to doing hills, it's probably not a good idea to do a hilly run right away. And another thing I just thought of is treadmill running. So all winter, we were stuck at home. You probably had a treadmill, maybe you had a treadmill, maybe not. But if you're running at 0% incline for treadmills, and you've been training on the treadmill all winter and you're running, you know, X mileage, the track is pushing your legs back. So you're not using the same muscles as if you were running outside. So if you're running on the treadmill for 3 miles and you go to the outside, you're going to work totally different muscles. So you want to go back to scaling it properly. Start with 1 mile, or what I always recommend is always when you're on the treadmill, do 2.5% incline. So you're slightly going uphill. That's going to make you work your posterior chain more versus having the track push your legs back.
And do that at a slower pace. Because I think one of my biggest pet peeves is when I walk through a gym and I see people running at Mach 80 and they're hanging on to the rails.
Yeah, don't touch the rails on any cardio equipment. You're hurting yourself more.
We want to keep it a reciprocal gait with proper mechanics and form, and you just slow down your speed. Maybe don't do as much of an incline, and just work on that reciprocal gait. Okay, so that's going to be the best way to train from treadmill to land again. All right, so we talked about some of those intrinsic factors. So I want to touch on like previous injuries or muscle imbalances that can contribute to the running. So studies have shown that the injured runners have an almost 75% increase of sustaining another injury. So hip alignment, and I actually would say hip, pelvis, spine alignment, those are all very critical in transferring the load all the way down the chain. So common injuries, I'm sure most of you have heard about this, but ITB or iliotibial band syndrome. It's a friction syndrome of the muscles on the side of the leg, and we tend to see it a little bit more in females versus males. Can be the differences in what we call a Q angle of the female athlete versus the male athlete. Also, when you're transferring that load down to the knees, then we'll see the knees are the #1 site of injury in 28% of all of our runners. So that's where you're getting the loads being transferred to the knees. The knees aren't designed to take that load. And so you'll see those meniscus irritations. There's something called knee plica. Those can get irritated. Old injuries from when we were, warrior athletes, those might come up, and usually we'll see some flare-ups of some of those older injuries. Working further down the chain, I'm sure most of you have heard about Achilles tendonitis. So that's in the calf muscle. And again, we tend to see that Achilles tendon down the back of the calf muscle into the heel. It gets a little bit more aggravated once we are 40 and older. Again, because that tissue becomes less pliable, and it actually can get a little bit riskier to run on tissue that's not as pliable. If we're looking all the way down through the kinetic chain, we talk about the muscle imbalances. So if one joint's not obviously functioning the way it should, and the muscles around that joint are not functioning the way they should be, it's going to transfer all the way down what we call the kinetic chain, and then it can manifest itself in other joint structures. So in my opinion, muscle balance is like crucial. It's very crucial for running, because as the foot strikes the ground, you have to be able to effectively and efficiently load those structures. You have to be able to rotate the trunk and the pelvis, and then the back extensors and the hip abductors and external rotators. They are all major stabilizers of the spine and the pelvis. We also look at the importance of core and hip strength. So we, in a recent study, they looked at recreational runners averaging a minimum of 10 miles per week for 3 months. And they did muscle testing of hip flexors and extensors, abductors, and internal rotators. And 30 out of the 46 runners were injured. And there was a statistically significant difference between the strength of the injured side and the non-injured side. 33% had Achilles tendinosis, 30% ITB, 20% anterior knee pain, and 7% with stress fracture, and 3% with patellofemoral pain. So the hip abductors and the flexors were also weaker, and the hip adductors, which are the muscles on the inside, were stronger on the injured side. So that was just like a lot of like peanut gallery talk, but basically we have to keep those muscles balanced from left to right and front to back.
Yeah, so if you start to run and you get hip pain, a good solution isn't to stop running and rest, then it feels better, and then start running again. Make sure to address the issues. Don't step over dimes to pick up pennies or something, as the saying. So address what's causing the pain before you go back into training. You have resources here, myself or Rochelle, to help you. If you have a recurring injury, ignoring it isn't gonna fix the problem. I know it might be the easy solution, but meeting with one of us to help address your injury so you can continue to train or run in a healthy way.
So that actually leads us into our myths about running. So that myth number 2, push through the pain. So I usually tell people pain that does not go away within hours after running, it's probably a problem, and you probably should have it addressed. So I usually tell people sore but safe philosophy, meaning, if you're just a little sore because you're just starting to run, or maybe you increased your mileage, or maybe you increased or changed your footwear, if you're just a little sore and it goes away, then you're still safe, and you probably are okay to not address that issue unless it keeps reoccurring. Okay. So anything that's sharp or exceeds a score of 3 out of 10, or wakes you up at night, or persists or occurs in the same place or the area of your body every time you run, you should probably just pause and just take a look at what the source of that pain is and why it's happening. We'll jump back up to myth 1. Recovery is a break from training. Runners age 35 and over should incorporate recovery time in their weekly training plan. So that just means that you're not running every single day. And again, it's that our age is going up and our tissues are just less pliable, less elastic, and we are organisms designed to move, but we are sitting all day long. So those tissues just continue to get tighter, less pliable. So taking those necessary recovery days are important. And then also myth 3, you can safely zone out on a run. I love this one because I always tell people, when you're running, I want you to engage your brain when you're running. And it could actually even be with just walking. So you want to work on your form to improve those subtle movements. So like, what do you notice when you're running? So when your feet are striking the ground, what do you notice? Do you notice that one foot lands different than the other? Do you feel like you can't find your left hamstring versus your right hamstring? Do you feel like you're not shifting your weight to one side versus the other? Do you feel like you are reciprocal, meaning alternating your arms, or are you holding your body stiff and with your shoulders shrugging up towards your neck when you're running? Are you just nice and relaxed? So you really can't zone out when you're running. So back to that, it's therapeutic. I just like to zone out when I run. Yeah, you can do a zone out run if it's just for that reason. Like you just want to go on a run and you don't want to think about it. You just are there for the therapeutic benefits of just getting out of your space and just running. But if you're actually training, or you're actually starting a running program, or you want to improve your running program, you really can't just zone out on your run. So we ask you to pay attention to that, because you should actually be paying attention to all of those components, so that if something does develop and you need to see somebody and discuss it, and it just makes it a little bit easier for us to kind of hear your story and figure out what we can be doing to help you. So
and then back to myth 1, I have something to say. For the recovery from training is a break. So we get the benefit during recovery. We don't get better during our runs. Is when we are recovering is when we create those gains in our training. So making sure to recover. Those aren't rest days. You aren't doing anything. Those are the days where we're actually getting the benefit of training.
all right, so you want to run, right? Okay, so if you are an avid runner, you probably already know this. But if you are just starting a running program, or you're like, hey, I want to do it here and there, but I want to make sure that I'm doing it safely so that I'm not getting injured, we are going to make sure that you are choosing the right shoes. So, and with choosing the right shoes, what I tell people when they come in and see me, first thing I look at is I say, let's look at your arch. So we're going to talk some arches, and I'm not talking the golden arches of McDonald's. I'm talking the arches of your foot. All right. So usually arches there's 3 categories. Okay. So you've got like a normal arch, you've got a high arch, which is kind of like looks like a cave arch. And then you've got a really flat arch, or what we call pes planus, or a flat foot. All right. So when you are looking at your arches, or if you were to go into a shoe store to get help with that, they can look at your arches and determine the best fit for you. Because based on when you're running, as soon as your heel hits the ground, your foot does have to go into some what we call pronation, where it kind of tips in, but then it should come back out of that and back to what we call a normal foot strike. And if you have a normal arch, then that will help you determine what kind of shoe you need. Okay, so you're going to need like more of a stability shoe, or just something with moderate control. If you have a higher arch, sometimes we call that more of like a supinated foot, or an underpronated arch. So it's higher than normal, so it does not absorb the shock through that arch as you're running. Okay, so usually more of a cushioned shoe is better to absorb that, and has a little bit more flexibility. Now, something with a flatter arch, usually that issue with that is that they tend to pronate or move in a little bit too much, and then they have that inability to come back out of that, and then they spend too long in this flat-footed position, and so then you'll hear or see a lot of issues with Achilles tendonitis or plantar fasciitis. So you want to look for more of a motion control shoe or a firm stability shoe. If you can't find the right shoe and or you just bought a pair of shoes and you're like, oh, I can't invest in another pair of shoes, you could always try a pair of Superfeet inserts in those shoes. But I usually tell people, if you have a good shoe and you invest in a good shoe that's right for your arch and right for you, you should not have to add an insert. You should not have to add custom orthotics. Okay, so that's not for everybody, but that's generally my opinion. So when you're choosing a good shoe, you want to make sure that I have some examples here, but you want to make sure that the heel counter, so that's this part in the back, does not fold in. So in the back of the shoe, it should not fold in. Okay, so this isn't necessarily a good stability shoe for that heel in the back. Okay, the toe box should be able to bend easily. It shouldn't be too rigid. It should just have some flexibility, but you obviously don't want it to bend through this middle section. I know there's some shoes and brands out there, you can literally fold them in half and they still advertise them as running shoes. I don't agree with that type of shoe.
There's a place for those, but for the average person who's trying to be relatively healthy, no. Just no.
just no. They might look cool, but.
And they might try to sell you on the benefits of barefoot running, and sure, work your way up to that. But if you're starting, just don't.
And the other point is this outside heel give. You want to make sure that you've got a nice, you don't have any heel give on the outside or inside. And then the heel height should be symmetrical. So that's looking through here. This should be symmetrical. It shouldn't, if you ran a pencil or a ruler across here, it shouldn't be tilted, right? So it shouldn't look like it's going at a slant. There are actually shoes out there where they'll try to build up one side or the other, and then they'll sell them as this is a great shoe for a high arch or a low arch. And really, that's not what you want. You want to make sure that heel height is symmetrical, all right? I've got Hope's shoe here. So this one, you can't push the heel counter in, and it doesn't have that give, and you can bend through the toe box. So good shoe. And I like to thank my friends at the Ruska Restorative Physical Therapy Clinic. That's the pastoral restoration clinic that I have worked with closely over the years. And every year we develop a shoe list, and I tend to work off that list. That's not an end-all be-all list, but it certainly gives people a place to start if you are looking for a shoe based on your arches. And also, if I'm working with someone on these pastoral restoration techniques, I will put people in one of these shoes just to help reinforce the exercises and the mechanics that I'm trying to teach you. All right. Oh, a couple other pointers. Go to the store. Actually, physically go to the store and put the shoe on and wear it in the store. Try several on, walk around. It should feel comfortable right away. If it feels like, it feels okay, but I feel like I have to break it in, it's not your shoe. All right. So you should be able to jump around from shoe to shoe and get a good idea of, yeah, this one feels the best on my foot, and I'm gonna buy this pair, and maybe I'll buy 2 pairs, so that you have maybe a pair that you wear inside and a pair you run outside in, and then you can rotate those shoes. Because if you can't remember when you last bought your pair of running shoes, then it's time to get a new pair of running shoes. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the runners, they know, they increase their mileage and they're like, it's time for a new shoe. But for those of you who are maybe just non-runners or just starting, or they're just recreational, if you can't remember when you bought your last pair of good shoes, then it's time to go get a new pair. All right.
I used to think that all ASICs were exactly the same, but the shoes are not the same. It's definitely worth the price of what you'll have to pay. So don't go to Kohl's and pick out one off the rack that looks cool.
I don't think we're supposed to name any. No.
Oh, sorry.
No, we have no. Nothing against Kohl's, but it's true.
Oh, no, yeah.
It's true. I know, like, a lot of people will say, well, I ordered off DSW, or I went into Kohl's because I got my Kohl's bucks I wanted to use. That's fine, but really, if you're really wanting a good shoe, And especially if you're a new runner or you're aging appropriately, just get a good shoe. It's worth the investment. It really is. So he's right. All right, well, we're going to jump along into resistance training.
Yeah, so we just talked about a bunch of risks that can happen. So risks, ways to compensate them are through resistance training. So why should runners lift? So as you run, the force of each step is about 3 times the body weight sent up through your body. So having muscular strength and stability to absorb that force, each step will minimize the load through your joints and reduce the risk of pain or injury. So by training these surrounding muscles of the knee, it helps stabilize it. Working the hips muscles will help stabilize the hips. Working the core will help stabilize the core, because if we are running, and Rochelle touched on this earlier, but if we aren't running at our best posture, we're working harder than we need to. So if we don't have a strong core and we're leaning forward, our lower back's working more, our upper back's working more, our legs are having to work more, we're not able to breathe as much. So working these muscles that complement our running form are going to lead to a safer run, a better run, than not training them. So it also improves muscle activation. Just because we have these muscles doesn't mean we're using them. So making sure that we train the muscles that we aren't working during running. So we work the calves a lot, the quads a lot, the lower backs, the hip flexors a lot during when we run. We don't work the hamstrings, we don't work the glutes, we overwork the lower back. So training those muscle groups through isolation exercises. So isolation being we're singling out one muscle group. So doing glute bridges to get the glutes firing or activated, doing hamstring curls, stability ball curls, things that we're isolating those muscles to wake them up. That way we're using them when we run. It helps improve biomechanics and muscle balance, which that's more of Rochelle's specialty.
Yeah, well, it's just, biomechanics is just a fancy term for how you produce your movement. So again, strengthening all these muscles will help with those biomechanics. So improving your movement patterns means just less wasted energy and more efficiency. All right.
So why warm up? So, and I touched on this a little bit, and we're all guilty of this. I'm guilty of this. We're working on our desk all day.
Mm-hmm.
We're sitting down.
Mm-hmm.
Our shoulders are forward. Our hips are tight. And we're just like, you know what? I'm in the mood to run. I want to go run. So we get up, throw our shoes on, and we just run. So we go from 0 to 100. We are forward, our hips are tight, and we stand up and we start running, which is literally the polar opposite of what we've been doing the entire time. And we wonder why our lower back hurts, or we wonder why our hips are hurt. We're not properly warming up. So spending 5 to 10 minutes before we run is going to save us a lot of pain. It'll improve our time, improves the amount of work we're able to do. So just preparing your body for activity. So 5 to 10 minutes. You can walk, you can do high knees, and Rochelle has a little.
Well, and backing up too, sitting at our desks a lot, something you could be doing functional movement throughout your day that would help too. Or maybe you're ending a meeting and you're going to go throw your shoes on and go run. Well, then stand up, maybe do some sit stands from your chair. So like I'll have people just at their chair, if it's not on wheels, just standing, sit to stand will help warm up those muscles. So functional things like that. You could go jog up your flight of stairs in your home 1 or 2 times. Some other ideas that I can show you is just, you can just march in place. So, just that marching in place. I like something, Jared's going to show you some lateral movement. So when we run kind of in this straight sagittal plane, right? So we need to get into some more, what we call lateral movement. So even just if you stood up from your desk and you just did some lateral lateral movement such as that. Or let's say you got your shoes on and you're out and you're ready to go for your run and you did some marching. Just doing some lateral movement such as that will help get yourself warmed up. Something else I like to teach people is going up and down your stairs in a different way. So let's move the shoes off the stairs. So again, you can find and feel some of those muscles. So, you know, most people I find aren't going to lay down and stretch their back, loosen their back, do some bridging. Most people just won't do that. So something you can do is on your stairs, you can, what we call retro stairs. So I have people just step back on their steps. You can hang onto your railings and then you put your next one up and you can kind of shift your hips over and then you go next step, you shift your hips over so that you're doing that shifting motion through your hips and loosening up your hips. You can also, with a railing, you can do something like some lateral, again, that lateral movement that Jared was just showing, up your stairs, just to get yourself warmed up before you run. Something else, if you're outside and you're near a curb or a step, just doing something like a leg swing helps, just gravity just helps kind of distract that hip, helps pull it down, and you kind of get that nerve gliding and sliding. And then again, you would just swing your leg on the other side. And then doing just some heel raises is another. So you could either stand just on the ground or doing them right there on a step. We don't have a great, I'm going to have Jared hang on to the chair, but something else. I'm going to hang on to this. You want to hang on to this so it doesn't move?
Yeah.
So I tell people too to do a reverse squat. So if you're at like a post or something that's sturdy, a park bench, but with your running shoes on, just squatting down into this position helps release your back, helps you get into your hip sockets. If you have a nice shoe on, your running shoe, it's going to give you that little ledge so that you can actually squat and drop down, and you're just going to hang on to that object. Sometimes I have people stand in a door frame and hang onto the door frame. That's a reverse squat, and you can just kind of sit down in that space and just breathe a few times, kind of get that diaphragm ready to go, and then do a few of those to just get yourself prepped for running.
Yep, just a quick 5 to 10 minutes to let the body know you're about to do something and use it.
Yeah, you don't have to do all of those things. We're just showing you some ideas so that you can make good use of your time. If you are done with your meeting or you're on to the next activity. All right. That was our warm up, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Cool down and stretching. So why cool down? So why is my screen look like that? Anyways, so why cool down? So cooling down will, keep the blood flowing through the body, so you don't stop abruptly, which will slowly lower the heart rate, lower the blood pressure. If we stopped quickly, we might get a little lightheaded, and it will allow the system to slowly come back to homeostasis rather than just abruptly.
It's also the best time to stretch instead of, people will say, well, don't you want me to stretch my hamstrings, Rochelle? Come on, Rochelle, don't you want me to stretch those hamstrings? No, I don't want you to stretch your hamstrings. I want you to actually feel and find them before you go for a run, get them warmed up, talk to those muscles when you're running. And then when you're doing your cool down and stretching, then you can stretch.
Yes, that's when they're the warmest, there's more blood flow, they are more pliable, they're able to stretch the hamstrings completely. Because if we're cold, all we're doing is stretching the weakest part of the muscle, not the entire muscle. So having your muscles warm, you're able to stretch the entire muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So again, 5 to 10 minutes, walk, do some light stretches. The stretches that you should be doing: hamstring stretch, quad stretch, lower back stretch, calf stretch, the ones that we've learned in PE class growing up. There's no magic stretch for these.
All right, so when I see a runner in my clinic, I have some of what I call my top 10 recommendations for runners. So my number one thing is keep your hamstrings strong, probably your left hamstring more so than your right. You can actually look at the bottom of your shoes and see if there's a wear pattern. And if you notice more wear on your right shoe than your left shoe, you're probably not finding your left hamstring like you should be. So those retro stairs that I talked about, or like Jared talked about, some hamstring curls, those are great things to keep those hamstrings strong. I'm also going to say this, avoid overstretching your hamstrings. I only say that because your hamstrings, because of where they attach to your pelvis, you actually want them to be strong and active with the appropriate length. Okay, so an example of that would be, so if I had Jared stand up right now and I said, okay, Jared, show me how far can you bend down towards your toes? And if he's like, oh, so he's able to bend forward and touch the top of his toes. That's perfect, okay? If he were laying down and I was checking his straight leg raise, if his leg just kept going overhead, that's too much motion. That means his hamstrings are overstretched or they're not activated, all right? So just because, if he stands up and he's reaching forward and he stops, at his knees, is that really because his hamstrings are tight or is it because his back is tight? Okay, so those are things I look at if you come in to see me. My third one is occasionally walking backwards upstairs or lateral upstairs to keep your glutes symmetrical. Also properly stretching your Achilles tendon.
Just the back of your.
Yep. So that's the standing calf stretch that you've probably done in the past. So another thing that a lot of people don't do is stretch their big toe, okay? So if I'm looking at my big toe here, I want to take that big toe and I want to stretch that big toe back periodically. That's another issue with the runners, is that we see some toes that don't bend very well, okay? You want to concentrate on striding out with your right leg and left arm. Try to find and feel your arch when you're running, and you're gonna want to also, we already talked about trying to release your back before you run, just to make sure that you're not running in a posture where your back is very tight and you're out here like this, or you're kind of in this slouched position. So making sure your back is released, and then being able to equally shift your weight. So that's something that you can do at your desk again. You're on a call, work on just that weight shifting at your desk, just to train your brain, like, yeah, I need to equally shift my weight when I'm running as well. The other, number 9, is keep your left, I said left, lower abdominals alive by performing sideline core activity. So it doesn't mean you ignore the right side. It's just the left side tends to be a little bit weaker in all of us. Doesn't matter who you are. It's just by design. So nobody needs to, we're all still equal. And number 10, my top 10 recommendation for runners is, you guessed it, wear the correct footwear. All right. Okay, what do I do if I get injured or want to improve my running form? Well, you make an appointment with me or a physical therapist. If you need to make an appointment with me, you can call 651-375-2273 at the LOL Well Clinic. And a physical therapist, most physical therapists can actually evaluate you, because we're movement experts. So we can help identify areas that you need to work on, and then give you some education on that, and then just give you the prescribed movement that we would want you to be doing. All right.
And that number is on the second slide as well. I guess you guys can't go there. But.
And of course, if you're like, what do I do for resistance training? Then you want to get in touch with either Jared or Hope.
Yes.
And they can help you design and target some of those muscles.
Are there any questions? I know there was one in the chat.
Can you go to the resources?
Oh yeah.
Oh, and if If you're watching today and you would like a coupon, 20% off, let us know in the chat or email Jared and we can send you out a coupon. This is for Run and Fun, 20% off. All these shoe stores are pretty nice though. If you say my physical therapist sent me, they usually give you a pretty good deal. They'll help you find a good shoe.
So with regard to running services, what are your thoughts on turf soccer fields? Those are fine. Those are rubber usually, so similar as a running track. Probably one of the best to run on for impact wise. And then do you have any tips on where to find shoes besides Kohl's? Rochelle just gave one. There are a lot of really good. Oh, and at the bottom here.
Yeah, at the bottom of this last slide, it's Run and Fun. There's two locations, Woodbury, St. Paul. And then there's the Running Room. There's Marathon Sports in Minneapolis.
And those all have running experts in there that will help look at your form, look at your orientation of your feet, and will give you options that they think is good for you.
Yep.
They've been trained they'll have you run on a treadmill or have you walk in the shoes, and they'll watch how your ankles move, and they'll recommend shoes. So those are definitely one of the better places to get shoes from. Plus it's supporting local businesses. 50s, which just cost me.
I don't know if I can even read that.
So for the double hip
replacement.
In her 50s, which has caused me anxiety over if I should keep running. Do you have any tips for strengthening joints to prevent deterioration, or any supplements helpful?
So I think if I understand it correctly,
So she's trying to prevent her from having hip surgery. So what
Right.
should she do? Just a basic strength program. I mean, if you are working through full range of motion under load and you're scaling your running properly, I mean, you should be fine. It's just being consistent with your strength training program, full range of motion.
and if you have any underlying, she probably had underlying pathology such as arthritis, either osteo or a rheumatoid kind of arthritis. Those things, sometimes they can't be prevented. We can prolong getting the hip replacements, but sometimes they just can't be prevented or stopped. So there might come a time when I'll say to people, might be time to scale back.
Yeah. And just moving in general. I mean, keep moving.
Keep moving.
Yeah. Don't just.
Find another mode of activity.
Exactly. And you don't need to run. It's definitely not needed. Rowing. There's different ways to get your heart rate up. And as I prepare for hunting, I have to wear my hunting boots while walking around on the treadmill.
Oh.
I mean, it's fine. It's going to put a lot more wear and tear on your hips, but again, you're training for that, right? You want to be able to wear those boots while walking in the field. So, I mean, if your MO for wearing those boots is to help you get your hips stronger, yes, it's not going to make you burn any more extra calories, anything like that.
If it's a matter of, is it
Performance.
is it serving me any good? I don't know.
Yeah.
You could probably train in a good shoe and be just fine in your boots.
Yeah.
If you go out hunting.
Just train more or walk farther than you would with your boots. So your body's acclimated to that distance.
Otherwise, you might find that you're getting breakdown like in your feet, like plantar fasciitis or Achilles issues, things like that. Anything else?
Did we miss any of them? No other questions. Don't be shy.
And you can always email if you're.
Yeah, if you have any specific questions and you don't want to ask in here, definitely email us. We're easy to find.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions. I know sometimes you don't think of something until after.
Oh, yeah.
So feel free to reach out. We hope you got some good takeaway points today. I think the number one pearl in today is please, please, please just have good footwear.
Yeah. Yes, and scale properly.
Scale
don't
properly.
just get out and like, oh, I used to run 5 miles a day, 5 years ago, and start running 5 miles right away.
Because Rochelle told me if I had new great shoes, No.
Yeah, and I know motivation is high when we start. I get that. We want to take advantage of that, but take advantage of that in other areas of your health. Don't just run 5 miles. Maybe run 2 miles and then spend the next, 15 minutes working on mobility or strength training, or do some of those exercises that we'll send you after. So make sure to write in the chat your email addresses. I don't know. Do they save the participants? We are not tech people, by the way.
Right. Becca's not our
I
special.
can show you how later.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Yes. So this is our first one. We would like to do more. We just never know what you guys want to know about. We've been in this industry for years, so some of this stuff is just, it happens every day. So we don't realize it's like good knowledge that we can share. So if you have any ideas of more lunch and learns that you are interested in, please email us so we can create those for you.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. Have a wonderful week and enjoy this nice weather we have coming up.
Go for a walk. You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes left in your day. See you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.